Yeah, I believe in you. You can do it, Nicole. Hey, everyone. How delightful to see you. You have no idea how much of an honor it is to be invited to this nerd shit. I dropped out of high school, so being invited to talk to smart, educated people about a topic, hot damn, I never thought I'd see the day. But I am a massive, massive fan of Formula One. Make some noise if you're also a fan of Formula One. All right. No, zero judgment at all, but make some noise if you're a fan just from Drive to Survive. It sounded like pretty much all of you. Cool, okay, that's good. There will be probably some stuff in this you don't know. If you're an old school Formula One fan, I think there's probably nothing particularly new, but God, it's just lovely to hear someone talk about it, isn't it? And if you don't currently watch Formula One, you should. And I understand there's a lot of reasons why you might not. And I think one of the key reasons is everyone has sold you Formula One and all the normal. You already know it's exciting, it's, like high action, all of that shit, right? But that makes it sound very serious. And it's a pretty silly sport at its core. And I think that's overlooked. And if I'm going to convince you to get into Formula One, then we have to look at some of the sillier aspects. So tonight, I will be talking to you about Formula One's greatest holes. Just some of them, because I will be honest, I had to keep trimming this because I found a lot of holes I liked. Primarily Valtteri Bottas's butthole, but that's one of the images from his nude calendar he released, and you should go check it out. Honestly, there's no more Valtteri Bottas in this presentation, but I wanted you to see that. So I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite holes in Formula One tonight. What type of holes are we talking about? I hear you all ask in unison. Obviously, we were talking about unintentional holes, yeah? You've got your intentional holes. They're meant to be there. And then just your standard loopholes. But we do have to cover the in-betweens. I've got an unintentional hole that did lead to an intentional hole. And I have an intentional hole that very much utilized a loophole. Yep. Let's crack in then. First up, obviously, we'll be covering manholes. There's one, plural. Obviously not those. We're talking this sort of thing, right? This is actually a manhole in Las Vegas. You may have heard of it. It's a city. And they started racing Formula One there recently, a couple of years ago, right? Formula One races on either sort of tracks that are designed and built specifically for racing on, or they'll race on tracks that are basically city streets that are blocked off, made safe, and then they get to go racing. And one of the things that you will encounter on a city street such as Las Vegas is these little manholes, access to piping, plumbing, I'm sure you all understand. And usually with a cover, I should tell you as well, there's a banana for scale, just to make sure you know what we're dealing with here. And Vegas, a couple of years ago, had these manholes with these little manhole covers, right? And look, we should talk about aerodynamic. You guys know aero? You guys know wind on top, push car down? Good? Cool. Also, they've got like a bunch of shit under the floor now. Look, I'm not very technical. I can't. But the wind under that also sucks the car to the ground. And I believe, and again, I'm not technical, but I believe the reason that it sucks the car to the ground rather than sort of sucking the track to the car is that tracks are heavier than cars. Admittedly, I've used Spa there, probably the heaviest track, but I've also used a 2023 Alpine, which was a heavy pig of a car. So I assure you with a lighter track, you would still find the same things in these scales, which I fully control. So look, with a manhole, though, you get the cover, and that is sort of a bit of track, but it is definitely lighter than a Formula One car, yeah? And so then we do see the track sucked up into the car, and what you get is something like this, which happened a couple of years ago when they did race at Vegas. Not this car, but this one here. Boom! Yeah. Sucked it up, boom, into the car, blew up the engine, gearbox, wrecked the car, right? And the best footage I could find of it is from a traffic cam. Which already goes a long way to proving my point that Formula One's pretty silly at its core. That's not the best footage that should exist of a major sporting event. But this is like a freak accident, right? Like this drain cover coming up, doing the car in like that. And so they actually kind of ended up penalised in a sense because of it, because the rules didn't really have a drain hole sort of provision. But what I find crazy about this is that that happened a couple of years ago, but in 2020, Sebastian Vettel also ran over a manhole cover, right? They had to cancel FP3, and then qualifying was delayed while they fixed manhole covers. Also, in Azerbaijan in 2019, George Russell, they had to cancel free practice 1 and fix every manhole cover around the circuit because the same thing happened. Also, in 2017, in Malaysia, Romain Grosjean got a puncture at over 200 kilometers an hour. A speed that can very much kill someone because of this incident that is a freak accident that doesn't usually happen. Also, 2016 Monaco. Nico Rosberg got a puncture loosening the manhole cover, and then Jenson Button went over it and just broke like a bunch of stuff. Just broke a bunch in the car. Right, this is way more common than a freak accident. Here's, it's not even that like recent, 2010, Monaco, Rubens Barrichello. That's from a drain hole cover, wrecked the wheel, and look at that crash. And I've shown this video because it shows how Formula One cars are designed to have all the wheels fall off first, so they're just stuck in their little tub, which is the most cartoon way for a car to fall apart. It's very silly, but I also find it very silly that every time we go to a street circuit, this fucking happens, and then they go, oh, holy shit, that's weird. We should concrete up all those manhole covers. They are doing a new street circuit in Spain in a year or two, and I promise you, you're going to see a news article about this happening. But anyway, had these drain covers stayed where they were supposed to be, there would be no holes. These were unintentional holes. As is this hole in the front of Kimi Räikkönen's Renault back in, or Lotus, Renault Lotus back in the day, it was 2012, I think. He finished second in this race. That really didn't impact the car much, but he was absolutely chuffed that he'd put this hole in the front of it because he was so much cooler throughout the race, right? Because obviously that just let air into the cockpit, and he raved about it. He was like, this is amazing. We should do this all the time, right? Because they do get very hot, even though it's an open cockpit. You might not realize quite how hot it gets inside that cockpit, to the point where it is talked about as a thing. Perhaps we should have a rule to cool the drivers down somehow. To give you an example of just how hot these drivers are, oh yeah. Oh shit, yeah. Oh, yes. But for the data about how hot they are, the main track that is talked about as a concern from a physical standpoint for drivers is Singapore, right? So we'll look at that. Singapore, we usually have a track temp of around 40 degrees Celsius. What that translates to is up to 60 degrees in the cockpit. Usually runs about 50 to be fair, but it goes up to about 60 degrees. Genuinely incredible. They lose about 4 kgs over the course of that race just from sweating it out, which already sounds fairly impressive. Also, if you don't know how much 4 kgs is, it's 4 blocks of butter. But assuming they're 1 kg blocks, I should specify. But this is about 90 minutes of racing, right? An hour and a half, or about half the length of somebody doing a marathon, say. In a marathon, an average runner will lose 3.5 kgs. Marathon runners are losing less weight running for twice the time. It's genuinely massive. And now, what we see in modern Formula One cars, as stipulated by the rules, is this little hole on the nose, right? Which I love for a bunch of reasons. It's there to cool the drivers, but also everyone seems to be under the impression that teams are definitely using it as an aero part, even though they're not supposed to. But I could not find any information anywhere on what anyone thinks exactly they are doing as an aero part with it, which is just silliness that I enjoy. A little bit of mystery, but also it's like such a technical sport, and this hole is entirely there to cool down the drivers. And just in a sport so technical, for the solution to be just drill a hole in the front is fantastic. And I have to assume, I haven't found anything that does back this up admittedly, but the fact that only a few years before this was mandated as a thing, Kimi Räikkönen put a hole in the front of his car and raved about the cooling, I'm fairly sure that unintentional hole caused this now intentional hole that all of the cars have, yeah? All right, now we can move to just an intentional hole, eye holes, right? Drivers have got them. They're supposed to. They keep their eyes in them. And it's incredible what they do with them. You know how in every sport, like whatever muscle you're using a bunch, you're going to work out, and like a bunch of sports have sort of freak shit people can do where their muscles are obviously now like beyond what you're kind of like, that's not how it was supposed to be. Racing car drivers very much have that with their eyes. Because when you're going at that speed, the vibrations are intense, right? And in order to be able to drive the car that fast, that consistently, what they've found doing a bunch of research on what's happening with their eyes is that genuinely the muscles holding their eye in place have strengthened so they can stabilize their eyeball during races. So I have, as an example, here's what a driver will see. It's Fernando Alonso going up on Rouge, the greatest section of racetrack ever. And you'll see, like, when he gets, look at that vibration. There's sections where you just can't really see where the fuck you are as it vibrates over those, right? And that's a fairly smooth section of racetrack, I'll say, as well. There's a lot nastier bits. And then luckily, somebody's actually stabilized that footage. This is what it looks like from their eyes, where just the whole way, you can still see the track, know what's happening. I just think that's fascinating. Also, they all blink at the same time every lap of every race. They've done motion trackers on their eyes, and because when you blink, it's a fraction of a second, but like the speed they're going, it's about 20 meters they'll lose every time they blink. And so there's sections of track where you cannot afford to be blind for 20 meters. And so they did eye trackers, and every single driver, exact same time, every lap, every track, they're blinking, where they've realized is the safe part to blink. And they're blinking significantly less per minute than what we do as well. So people are supposed to have eye holes. These are intentional holes. Now an intentional hole that definitely uses a loophole. We go to 2010 when McLaren released this sweet chrome car. That paint, by the way, they spent millions of dollars developing a chrome paint that was light enough to use on a Formula One car, just so they could have that livery. But they released this car, hoped no one would look too closely, because what they'd done is discovered something very cheeky in the rules. As we discussed, downforce good, right? Sticks the car to the road. Problem with downforce is it also creates a lot of resistance, right? So if you're going in a straight line, you don't need that downforce, but it is just slowing the car down with wind resistance. Best case scenario, no downforce on the straights, heaps in the corners. But the rules around Formula One mean you cannot have any parts that like move. So you can't have the car so it sets up and changes between corners and straights. What you can do, or at least could do back in 2010, is have the system here, which admittedly those two colours don't show up that great on this. But basically you've got a hole here where air comes in, and then it comes through here, and there's another hole here, and the air would go out, right? And when that happens, you then have another hole here, air's coming in, it goes down here, ignores the wing entirely, and they've got a very slippery car on a straight. But if you cover the hole, this wind all goes up here, stops that from going down there, and the whole lot goes over the wing, right? So they could, basically by covering up a hole, but without moving parts, they could dictate the wind either giving them a bunch of downforce or giving them fuck all downforce. And the way they did that was with that hole there, which was right by their knees, they just had a pad and they would cover it up. That's all they'd do. And then other teams saw this and were like, shit, we need that. It's very, very good, and they're winning a lot of races because of it. But because they hadn't developed it right from the start, they ended up in a situation where they had to put it somewhere like here, which you'll notice is a long way from the knees. But it's very close to their hand. And so your driver's just taking their hand fully off the wheel to cover this hole whilst racing. I can give you a couple of examples here. Here's Nico in the hands off the wheel now. So that's his hands off the wheel. I'll tell you when he gets back on. His hand is off the wheel this entire time. He is almost hitting the rear of this other car at close to 300. There's it back on, right? Then get Sebastian Vettel here, hand off the wheel. He's now at 220 kilometers an hour, keeps pushing up. He's going to put his hand back on the wheel just for this corner. There it is. And then off that wheel, and he's sitting at about 300 kilometers an hour. Yeah, the FIA, the governing body for Formula One, decided that was a little bit unsafe. And so they ruled that out, and that was no longer allowed to be in the sport. Interestingly enough, when Ferrari's chief was asked about it, and the potential that it was quite dangerous, he was just like, oh, our drivers are very good, and then just walked off before he could be asked any more questions. Next one. Okay, now we're into just loopholes, just straight up loopholes, no holes. And my favorite, I think, loophole to happen in recent history is this car, right? Which doesn't look like a lot, but it is very pretty in pink. Because Formula One, so there's 10 teams in Formula One, and they all have to build their own car, right? But not every piece of that car. They have to build their own chassis. They have to build most of the parts. They can buy in engines. Usually there's 3 to 5 engine developers in Formula One at any time. You can buy the gearbox from them as well, or build their own gearbox. And then there's a few other bits and bobs that they can buy off another team, but largely they have to build their own car, right? They can't even buy like the schematics off another team and then build it themselves. They have to develop the parts. So that's why everyone found it a bit odd when this car came out, because it looked identical to the Mercedes from the year before. And there was a whole, I know also all Formula One cars look the same to you people. I get it. But no, every tech person, everyone was like, what the fuck is that, right? And what they've done is it is absolutely against the rules to copy the part, or to buy a bunch of these parts in, or to get those schematics and make your own or whatever. Certainly to steal the schematics would also. But what wasn't illegal was to take a lot of photos, like so many photos that you could rebuild it in a 3D model from all the angles you have. And then just start running that through the wind tunnel and through your simulators, and then just figure out how to tweak it slightly to get it all working, right? And so genuinely, and they've actually changed the rules now to stop this happening again, but they just went out and all season took so many photos of the Mercedes. It was the fastest car that year, and then just figured, well, if we build that, it's still going to be pretty quick the next year. They went from 7th in the championship to 4th. And that's incredibly impressive because Lance Stroll drives for them. They have no right being in the top half of the field. They did get penalised on one thing, and I actually think they shouldn't have, if only because of the sort of cheek of how they went about this. The one part they could not take photos of and copy is the brakes, because it's got a bunch of interior stuff that they can't get in and see, right? And that was the year before this is 2020, but in 2019, that brake was on the list of parts you could buy, right? That was on the list of parts you were absolutely allowed to buy. In 2020, it was no longer on the list of parts you're allowed to buy. What they did was they bought the plans in 2019 when it was legal to do that, and then from those plans, built them themselves in 2020 when they had to do it. And the FIA did rule that no, that did not count as developing your own part because you bought the plans when it was legal to buy their part, and they got penalised for that. But we're allowed to keep running this car the entire season just by taking photos and copying it, which again is very silly, and the silliness is massively underlooked in this sport. Nobody looked at rugby and cloned Richie McCaw to win a match, you know what I mean? Or at least got some guy who looked vaguely like him and just shaved him the right way. This is a silly sport. So look, you can't just copy someone's car, but you could totally copy photos of it. This was a loophole. And so I guess, in conclusion, if I'm totally honest, I've just really enjoyed talking about Formula One to you. Don't really care if you agree with me about any of my points. Do we got any questions? Oh, first question, yeah, where can you see me next? Oh, this Friday, actually, at Good Times Comedy Club for Absolute Chaos. Yeah, there's only like 10 tickets left. I'd buy them real quick. Some TV names on there. Billy T nominee. Geez, that's going to be a good show. Any other questions?
Thanks, great presentation. I was just wondering, how do they prevent that loophole now of people copying the cars?
To be honest, I don't know the technical side of how they've clogged that loophole up, but I guess they just wrote some legalese rule being like, no taking photos. I guess they would have written it in some way where you have to actually develop, start to script. But yeah, it was genuinely quite an intense conversation at the time because they technically had developed the parts and they'd made very sure to keep all this background data and files on all of the work they'd done putting this through wind tunnels and on their computer simulations to slightly tweak what they'd built from the photos so they could still show they had developed it. But yeah, people were not happy. I don't know how they've written the rule now, but they have stopped it, unfortunately. I'm upset about it. Yes, at the back row. There's a microphone coming your way, but if you can shout, go nuts. What team would I drive for? Like, I mean, that depends. Are you talking like, am I like coming out at, like I'm in F2 at the moment, I'm about to win the championship and get offered a seat? Or am I like Fernando Alonso on his last ditch effort? You know, or like Hamilton done everything and like, fuck it, let's do Ferrari for a bit. You know what I mean? I'm about to come into my prime. So we're like a few years in, about to come into my prime. Probably Aston Martin. Adrian Newey and that new wind tunnel is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the next couple of years. Late 26, they're going to nail the rules. But otherwise, hey? No, but I wouldn't want to work for any of these billionaire cunts. Like, let's be honest, they're all... Right, like I love the sport, but I have to admit there's no ethics. Like Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton are the only two good people who have ever raced a Formula One car. Like let's be real here. They're all dating models who are 12 years younger than them. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Daniel Ricciardo gives a shit about moral philosophy. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Any millionaire who's not figuring out how to be a better person can fuck off in my books. But that's not what my talk's about tonight. But no, I think, Aston Martin are probably going to nail it. But also, this Mercedes engine, Aston Martin are going with the Honda engine. And don't get me wrong, they've done some great work lately with that Honda engine. But like, Mercedes engine in this new 2026 rules, where we're going back to more engine-heavy regulations rather than downforce heavy regulations. Mercedes is the other one that I think is probably, or weirdly Renault, or obviously McLaren. I mean, the obvious ones are like McLaren still should be dominant. But Renault with a Mercedes engine should be quick. Mercedes engine should be very quick. Aston Martin has the newest facilities and the greatest mind ever to enter Formula One, so they should win it. Adrian Newey has won more Formula One titles than anybody else in history. He's built almost every winning car for the last 30 years. It's fucking insane. And so one team was like, hey, here's a blank check, come work for us. And he was like, okay. So they'll win now. Any other? Yes.
Yeah, hi. Jess really wanted me to ask this question.
You're a long-time listener, first-time asker. Yeah, go on.
Occasionally we see like minor incidents in the race where a car takes on some damage. Mm-hmm. And like it's something that looks as if it should be catastrophic, but it doesn't do that much. Like in some cases, it actually helps. Mm. Do you think some cars are built so that those happen on purpose?
I mean, there's an argument that maybe they could work to figure it. Like, I mean, you're only allowed so many elements on the front wing, for example, but if you built it with like perforated edges so that popped out like in a crash that you still then had to, I mean, yeah, I don't think so, no. But I think it's a great thought experiment. Could you build a car to fall apart in a way that once it's fallen apart, it no longer fits the rules, but it is faster? Is a solid fucking question to ask. Yeah. Any other?
We'll probably end it there, if that's okay.
Yeah, fuck yeah. All right, hey, thanks everybody. Good night.